What's up everyone, it's Manny from Vegan Rock Climbing again. Welcome back to the channel. In today's episode we're going to examine how we can manipulate hold quality through directional loading and body positioning. I've tried to align these little technique lessons in a consecutive manner so that climbers out there can learn the basics step by step by following the series, and that content of previous episodes kind of prepares them for the upcoming ones. In today's episode we're going to address how we can manipulate hold quality to our advantage by using the principles of directional loading, and this topic is to some extent related to the previous two episodes, which were about body positioning and gripping technique. If you haven't seen them, check them out here. The main message that I want to get across in this video is always try to get the most out of a certain climbing hold, not only by using appropriate gripping technique, but also by executing proper body positioning. In other words, hold quality does not only depend on hold size and shape, which are characteristics we cannot change, but also on our ability to apply correct directional loading, and this is something we can change and improve. The first thing we need to comprehend in order to do so is that all climbing holds exhibit a certain directionality. We can visualize this by drawing an arrow perpendicular to the main flank of the hold, which is the side where we actually hold on to. This arrow is now representing the most ideal direction for loading this hold, simple as that. As you can imagine, we should always aim to match our gripping direction as closely to the most ideal loading direction as possible. This will minimize our grabbing effort, which ultimately leads to a more efficient climbing style. Climbers tend to label climbing holds based on their directionality, and this is a good way of keeping this aspect in mind. Basically, we can distinguish between climbing holds whose directionality points towards the climber and holds whose directionality points away from the climber. The former ones comprise of upper holds, which is in my opinion the most classic scenario and I think also the most frequent one. If we move more to the side, more to lateral directions, left and right, we've got side pulls. And if we complete the circle down to the lower end of our range of motion, there we've got underclings. We can apply the same principle to climbing holds whose directionality is pointing away from the climber. If we start again at the top end of our range of motion, here we've got underclings again. If we move more to the lateral sides, left and right, here we've got something in English, it's called a Gaston. In German we say Schultergriff, which would pretty much translate to shoulder hold. And this describes the character of these holds quite well, because we literally have to press out of the shoulder in order to hold on to these ones. And if we are moving down to the lower end of our range of motion again, here we've got mantles. These are those holds we literally have to push onto in order to stand up on some boulders, for example. As I pointed out in previous episodes, we must not get caught in binary thinking here. Climbing holds and their directionalities exist in countless variations throughout the whole circle of our range of motion, and there exist also climbing holds which exhibit multiple directionalities, like a lot of pinches, for example. However, as a general rule of thumb, we can say that a hold whose directionality is pointing towards the climber, towards us, is almost always better than its counterpart whose directionally is pointing away from us. Let's continue in better lighting. Let me give you an example. As I'm climbing through this problem here, I'm getting this vertical edge first as a Gaston for my left hand, which is quite hard to hold on to. But as I'm moving forward, the Gaston for my left hand turns into a side pull for my right hand. And this is now much more comfortable to hold on to, simply because its directionality is now pointing towards me. We can show the same thing with underclings. When we have an undercling problem, we usually get the undercling first from below. And this is quite hard to hold on to. But as we are moving forward, as we are getting our center of gravity above the main flank of the hold starts to get much better. So now that we've discussed hold directionality in the plane of the climbing wall, I briefly want to talk about directionality in the room in front of the climbing wall. So now we're going to add a third dimension to this whole theory here. Considering this new aspect, the next thing I want you to take away from this lesson should actually already sound familiar to you if you have seen the previous episodes. always try to move your center of gravity as close to the wall as possible. In terms of hold quality, it is absolutely always the best to stay in the two-dimensional plane of the climbing wall. In other words, every hold gets worse if we're leaning out into the room in front of the climbing wall due to the greater angle at which our grip attaches to the hold. Here's an example. This edge is relatively good as long as I do it right, as long as I keep my center of gravity below the hold and close to the wall on straight arms and on bent legs. As soon as I start stretching out my legs, moving my center of gravity away from the wall, it becomes harder and harder to hold onto the same edge. In my opinion, the effect becomes even more important when it comes to overhanging terrain and hold types which are not in-cut, like slopers for example. Let's take a look at this one here. It's quite okay as long as I hold my body strength, as long as I keep my ass close to the wall. As soon as I let go of my core, my ass starts to stick out and the angle between my arms and the wall gets bigger, which leads to less hold quality of this sloper here, and eventually it becomes so bad that I fall off. As you can see, this is one more reason why we should keep our center of gravity close to the wall, simply because it increases hold quality. Alright guys, there's one more thing that I want to talk about, then I'll let you go, and that's footholds. Do you remember when I told you? The main message that I want to get across in this video is always try to move your center of gravity as close to the wall as possible. Now there are some exceptions to this rule which I'm going to address in future videos. Now we're going to address the first and maybe most important exception from this rule. What about the directionality of footholds? Of course, if we encounter big, super nicely in-cut footholds, the same rules as on handholds are valid. Keep that ass close to the wall and literally sit on those footholds in order to save as much energy in your arms as possible. But what about flat, slopey footholds? What if we have to rely on friction? Sometimes we even have to step on a blank wall in order to perform a certain move. And this is often the case in flat, slabby terrain when climbing becomes more technical and less raw power than in the overhang. The third and last thing that I wanted to take away from this lesson is that we can increase friction of flat, slopey footholds by moving our center of gravity away from the wall. Just a short indoor example. On this relatively flat wall here, as long as I keep my body tight, I tend to slip a lot on my feet. As soon as I let go of my body, maybe even stretch out my legs, I generate more friction on those slabby, flat footholds due to the greater angle between my legs and the wall, and now I don't slip around anymore. This is directional loading of footholds. And now we're entering the next level of complexity of this wonderful sport, because as you can see, ideal loading of handholds sometimes exists in a trade-off relationship with ideal loading of footholds. And now the climber has to decide which one is the more important one in that certain situation on that certain problem. With these thoughts, I would like to end this episode here. If you got something out of this video, as always, please leave a like, it helps a lot. And don't forget to tell me your opinion in the comments down below. Subscribe for more awesome content, and thank you so much for watching guys. See you in the next one. Bye!